Welcome back in this segment of our show. Not brought to you by Tenova today, but we do like Tenova. This segment of your show is actually brought to you by Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land, and that is the Sports Source Showcase home. There you see it, 406 Turkey Cove Lane. That is the Cove at Turkey Creek. Phil Cobble does a tremendous job of finding you the perfect home for your family. And right now, as soon as you close, he'll also take care of your yard maintenance for 4 full months. Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land, and you can see his number on our desk throughout this segment. You call that number that's going to be on our desk, Phil answers. That's his direct line. So Phil Cobble Fine Homes and Land, they can treat you right. Okay. See, there it is. That's the phone number. Another NFL draft, another disappointing weekend for Vol football program. Only 3 Vols drafted last week. Jawan James, surprisingly, went in the first round of the Dolphins. Zach Fulton went in the 6th round of the Chiefs. Daniel McCullers, 6th round of the Steelers. Rajon Neal, Tiny Richardson, and James Stone were not drafted. Here at Sports Source, we bring the same chart out every year and do a little addition to it. Let's go ahead and put up the draft tracker. Now, that's pretty simple. That's right off an Excel sheet. What you get there are the number of players drafted out of Tennessee over 4-year cycles, because it's kind of like looking at the stock market. If you look at just every single year, it's up, it's down. This way you can see the bell curve. As you can see, right around 98 through 2001, look at all those players going in the NFL draft over a 4-year period. And then comes the slide, the unbelievably bad slide all the way down into the 12, 10 players, 13 players over the 4 previous years, 10 players over these last 4 years. It's just not a good sign for Tennessee when you look at that level of decline. But I also wanted to look and compare the talent in the SEC going into the NFL over the last 20 years. So this next graph, there we go, SEC draftees. Now this is the number of players total drafted out of the SEC from 95 to 04, 10 seasons, all right? In that period, Tennessee had the best record in the SEC, but like 1 game better than Florida over that 10-year span. And they had 10 more players drafted than Florida or anyone else in the SEC. Just a tremendous number of athletes. Basically, you're looking at almost 7 players a year coming out of Tennessee. Well, let's look at the next 10 years, these last 10 years, 2005 to 2014. LSU has jumped all the way up there. Still not as productive as Tennessee was, but Tennessee all the way down to 34 players. So instead of about 6.7 a year, and you'd love to see that 0.7 of a guy get drafted, down to about half of that. So let's look at this change overall. You see way down there at the bottom, Tennessee down 33 from one 10-year period to the next. You just haven't seen anything like that anywhere else in the SEC. I mean, the next biggest drop is down there in 10, 12, 13, minus 33. So when you come back and you look at Tennessee's record over the last few years, it's not hard to do the math on what's happened. And I continue to have people that say, well, there's a lot of talent over on that team. No, there isn't. Thoughts on those numbers?
I'll tell you what, I want to go something that wasn't quite on the numbers, but if you also look at your recruiting rankings, and that's not a perfect system, and then you look at the players you have drafted, I'll bet you there's a nice correlation there. And everybody says, well, they're not coaching them up. They're not coaching them up. I don't think people coach them up all that much. I think lots of times you get the guys in, and those are the ones that you get in better players, you get more of them drafted.
Well, and look at your list, John. The teams that won during the first period, in the first 10 years, those are the ones that are at the top. The teams that have been losing over this last 10-year period, they were at the bottom. So I think it definitely correlates.
Yeah.
And how are you supposed to continue your success from that previous decade with that drastic of a drop-off in the NFL draft choices? I mean, who's going to be able to coach?
And drastic is a good word.
Yeah, I mean, that's just not going to happen. So, yeah, people can keep saying the talent is there. That shows that it's not.
That second graph you showed of the last 10 years, Tennessee, where they were, kind of in the middle of the pack, to me that says about 5 and 7. It's about what they are the last 3 years. And the other thing, I just think you can almost sum it up in a sentence in saying, in that 10-year period, South Carolina has become Tennessee, and Tennessee has become South Carolina.
Yeah.
And LSU.
That's right. You look at South Carolina jumping up.
And their results are often opposite. When usually only one of the two is good in terms of records.
It's one thing that I know some people are out there, because I've heard this, and that is, well, if you don't win, they're not going to draft your players. But that's not true, because you see guys get drafted out of Hampton, out
McNeese
of
State.
McNeese State. If you're talented, they will find you. And we'll talk a little bit. The perfect example is Tennessee's offensive line. We'll talk about them specifically a little bit later in the show. But I don't think this is, well, Tennessee didn't win, so the scouts weren't looking at them. No. I think it's a better explanation as to why you haven't been winning. And Butch Jones is obviously, the recruiting class. The recruiting classes he's put together. The first one that he kind of rushed to put together. This last one, which was just really good. The one he's putting together next. Clearly, I think things are starting to change on that front. I expect that curve to start moving up over the next 2 or 3 years. But anyone that's out there right now saying, "Oh, but look at all the talent over there," it's not there. I don't know what you have to do to beat that.
And for the people who said it's about winning, and if you win more, your guys get drafted, they didn't win any more when they had Justin Hunter and Cordero Patterson. But everybody in the country could look at those two guys and say, those are NFL players, that's NFL talent, and look where they went. One first round, one just a few picks later earlier in the second round. And then off that same bunch, you had Michael Rivera get drafted as a tight end, and he's stuck in the NFL. So, no, winning doesn't really have that much to do with it.
And we see that chart, and we see what's on paper, John, and where we see it on the field is the glaring difference in team speed. Right. And those are the guys, the ones that have those 40 times are the ones that are being drafted. And that's the one area that, to me, that Tennessee is really, really fallen off. And that's what they got to correct, number one.
And then during all the transition, there were guys that went to other places, like a Derrick Rogers, where Tennessee isn't credited for that because he didn't work out at Tennessee.
Well, that's a good thing, but
yeah, but he's in the NFL. I mean, he would help your numbers, and I think that's sort of what confuses people is look at all the talent we had. We couldn't make it work. There's a lot of reasons for it, but the bottom line is talent gets you success, not success gets you talent in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think even though we mentioned 4 guys that would have been on the team a couple years ago, that's still 4 guys.
Right.
I mean, that's Hunter, and they're all receivers. I mean, it's 3 receivers and a tight end. So can you build an entire program and win ball games with 3 receivers and a tight end? And I think that's part of the issue as well, that you just haven't had. Well, again, over that period from 95 to 2004, when Tennessee was the top program in the Southeastern Conference by wins, you had 6 or 7 guys drafted every year. And we said, well, you would have had a 4th there. Or I mean, 6 or 7 year in, year out. Just an amazing drop-off that we've seen over that next decade. So it should be clear as a bell by now where the issue is. It's not coaching in terms of Butch Jones not getting it done. It's not the fact that they took a vacation. I keep seeing that on message boards. They took a vacation in the middle of the season last year when they played 3 top 5 teams in a row. They took a vacation. The issue is you don't have the players that you need to have in the Southeastern Conference. And the NFL scouts seem to agree. Hopefully, for this show's sake, Butch Jones can change that because I'm ready to talk about some wins. All right. Who's to blame for college players turning pro early and then not getting drafted? And can that problem be fixed? We got a lot more to come, including more look at the Tennessee basketball roster changes. Lots to come. Come on back on the Sports Source.